We're gonna wait like 5 minutes for people to show up. How's your day going? How's your day so far? I can't hear anything you're saying. Or type it in the chat. Football, like American football or international football? Okay, fantastic. Yeah, that's exhausting. That's a lot of running around. What position did you play? Like left wing or goalie or what position? Or you guys are just playing around? Central defense, midfielder. Okay, defense is always a little bit of a challenge, especially in midfield. You're the one who's running around the most in the midfield. So I used to play left wing, and I used to love left wing because I could like you don't run as much, and you're basically just in charge of trying to score the whole time. But you have to be very mindful of not being on side or off sides. So yeah, yeah, left wing is tough. Um, Forward, left wing, right wing, those are all very, you have to be really careful about being offside. But if you're midfield or your defense, you get to control who's offside. So it's like completely different. I miss playing soccer. Cam? What's Cam? Central attack midfield. Oh, interesting. Hmm. Wow. I didn't even know that. Central attacking midfield. I see. That is basically what Messi does. He's in the middle of the field. Yeah, he's like um a midfield forward. I basically consider that as like midfield forward. Like yeah, yeah. So he has like control of the entire field. No, I can't play camp. That'd be like a lot to think about. You have to be like conscious of a lot of different variables. But you control the game. That's probably why Messi does that, because you're able to basically control the entire offensive flow of that game. Um, so that's very cool. I see. Attacking mid. Oh my goodness, interesting. Man, my soccer coach was like not that yeah, he didn't teach us any of that. He was pretty good too, but he didn't like go into like the different um like strategies. We always just ran like I believe a 2-4 2-4-4-2 or something like that. We had like two defenses, four people like in the middle, or eight people, I guess, in the middle. Um, or no, I get that's there was only 11 players. Anyway, it was something like that. It was like a 2-4-3 or something like that. Yeah, 2-4-4. So yeah, we always had like yeah, because there's 11 players total, including the goalie. Um, Left wing, right wing, and then like four people in the middle, midfield, and then four defenses. So we were defensive heavy because like we were kind of like slow. So we had to be defensively heavy. Um, yeah. Anyway, let me see where these. Yeah, it definitely does. You only have two people, so you can't really attack at all because that's why. Because we weren't fast, we were very slow, so we had to do like focus on defense. Um, Let me text these people and see where they're at. Ah, these guys. We'll wait like 5 more minutes because we have a lot to discuss today, actually. So This guy, I don't know where he is. We'll start in 3 minutes regardless, because we have a lot to cover this today. Today's a very big, heavy CSS day. Um, mm. Oh, I see. You guys do a 4-2-4. That is very good for attacking. Um, yeah, that's definitely an attack focused formation. Who's your best player? They play you LB, uh, left. Okay, I see. Wow, very good. Hmm. I always kind of was curious about what it would be like to do goalie. Oh, I see. Left back. Ah, I see. I see. Then you have the two midfielders. Goalkeeper. Yeah, goalkeeper is very tough to do, man, because it's hard to practice unless you like, unless you have a good a good team to practice against. You got to be able to jump high. You got to be able to read like the defense extremely, extremely well and kick high. You got to be like able to keep to boot that ball like hard and like high. So goalkeeper is not no joke. It's very tough. Yeah, you get hit in the face. Ah, yeah. And then you might like hit your head. I always like worried about maybe hitting my head on the goal. Like, because you jump and like you got to be very mindful of where the like top of that goal is when you're a goalkeeper. I always like, and when I'm diving, like I always wonder, what if you dive and hit the pole of the goal? So anyway, goalkeeper is definitely tough. Yeah. Okay, it's 7:10, so we're just gonna get started. I don't know if these people are showing up, but anyway, go ahead. What's it? One more thing. All right, what is it? Oh, my least favorite position. Well, I'm not that very good at goalie. So my goalie like skills are the worst. So I would say that's my worst, my least favorite to play. Um, yeah, goalkeeper is tough. And it's painful. Okay, other than goalkeeper, I would say, hmm, well, the position that runs the most is midfield. So you get winded. I feel like midfield, I get winded a lot. And you're not really doing offense. And you have to be very very good at managing the field. So I would say midfield is probably yeah, midfield basically would be my, because you do a lot of running and you're not really attacking, you're not really focused on defense, you're kind of doing both. Um, But midfield is one of the most important positions you can play, yeah. So it's weird. That's my least favorite. I just like to attack, focus on one thing, either attack or defense. I don't want to be thinking of doing attacking and defense at the same time. That's a lot. Uh, so yeah, I would say probably midfield is my least because you're running the most and you have the most on your plate. Anyway, okay. Yeah, wing is definitely tough because you're basically like, well, uh, you have to be good at attacking. You're focused 100% on just attacking the whole time. So that's what wing is. Um, okay, let me go to the notes and we'll get started. So today is a very long day. So let me give you a link to the slides. I'll put the slides in the chat. So there's a link to the slides. And today's just focus on CSS. So today is a very long day. We're just looking at CSS, and there's a lot to discuss because we're diving deeper into CSS. We'll cover a lot, but there's so much. CSS is a deep, deep world. We're only going to touch the surface of CSS today. We're going to do a lot of playing around. So first of all, let's look at the most common CSS properties that you'll probably see in building any kind of website. So the most common CSS properties you can break down into 5 categories. The most common category is the font properties category. Although font properties is most common, we're going to go in order. We're going to go out of order and cover the layout and position properties first because they're more important. Although font is going to be used more often, we'll start by looking at layouts and then position properties. Then we'll talk about font properties. And font properties are basically like font family, font weight, font size, etc. You probably are familiar with already some fonts like fonts in Microsoft Word like Times New Roman or Arial. So we'll talk about font properties. And then the next most common type of property is backgrounds. So backgrounds are basically like controlling the color. Background color is the name of a property. Background image, background size. Those are very commonly used. Then the third most common is layout properties, which we'll talk about first. Layout properties are properties like margin, padding, top, bottom, left, etc. And then position also. And then the last 2 categories we'll look at are border properties and then text properties. Basically, border properties just like let you control the border. So like the border width, the border color, border collapse, which we've looked at already. And then we'll look at text properties. Text, you might think is like the same thing as font, but it's different. For text properties, it involves the appearance of blocks of text, not individual characters, but entire blocks of text. So it includes properties like text align, text justify, text decoration. It controls the look of blocks of text, not just individual characters like fonts does. So to learn more about any CSS property, basically the best resource is Mozilla's documentation site. Let me just quickly go to that site really quickly. We're not going to build Microsoft Word. That would be very that'd be a long process. But let me show you Mozilla's documentation. Unfortunately, we're not going to be building Microsoft Word. Let me show you Mozilla's documentation really quickly. So the website is, let me put it on the screen. The website is, let me make this big. The website is just developer.mozilla.org/docs/web/CSS. And that'll always take you to like their page on CSS. A lot, basically everything you could ever need to know about CSS is on Mozilla's documentation. And they're basically the canonical, they're like what everyone uses when it comes to that. They're like the final authority on CSS on the internet. So they are the ultimate reference on all things CSS. But another site that's much more readable, Mozilla can be a little bit difficult to digest. Like their stuff is meant for like professional developers. But another website that's very useful that has a lot of good stuff also, but it's not as like, serious is CSS Tricks. CSStricks.com. CSStricks.com has a lot of like good stuff. And when you get to CSStricks.com, make sure you click on Almanac, and then it's going to basically allow you to choose the selector. So I'm gonna right now just like select, for example, like font for F. So it's gonna give me the option of like all the font stuff. Here's font. So I click on font, and then it just talks to me about font. It gives me all the stuff that's like related to font. And it's very, very good at explaining a lot of different things. So I like CSS Tricks a lot. My favorite website though for learning CSS is CodePen. So CodePen is, you just go to codepen.io. And CodePen is basically like a giant playground. You can learn like anything CSS, HTML, and JavaScript related on CodePen. But it's really good for CSS and JavaScript. So for example, if I want to learn about font, I'll just go click on font. Yeah, I'll just search font. And then it's gonna like take me to all these basically little like pens or little drafts that people have written that explore how to play around with font. So I can even like search, be more specific, like font tutorial or examples. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, CSS font examples for class. So this goes over like font examples. Um, so it's just a very good playground because as soon as you open one of the little pens, it gives you like where you can code HTML, a little section where you can code CSS, and another section where you can code JavaScript. For now, we'll just focus on the CSS and HTML, and it basically lets you write code on the fly. For example, let me delete all of this. And when I delete everything, it's like instantly, it responds almost instantly to anything you do. I can do like an H1. Hi. And it automatically just like puts it in an H1. It's very, very, it responds almost instantly. Anytime, anything you type, oops, jeez. Oh, notice I put hi instead of H1. Now it just renders it. So it automatically renders anything you type. So it's very, very useful. So I love CodePen for that reason. The biggest value of CodePen is you can see what other people have done. So you can modify anything that they've done, and then you can like obviously create your own pens. So it's very, very useful.
What's the name of the thing again?
Codepen.io.
Code pin.
Codepen.io. Mm-hmm.
All right, I found it.
Yeah. I love this website because it's just a giant playground for CSS and HTML. And you could like see what other people have done. It's like a collaboratory where you can see like you can collaborate with other people very easily. I love that about CodePen. Okay, so that's let me go back to slides real quick. We'll probably use CodePen a little bit today just to explore some stuff. But those are the biggest that's what we're going to talk about today. Layout properties, position properties, font properties, background, border, and then text properties. So it's kind of a long day with a lot of material because we're going to be diving deep into all of that. So now let me see. Okay, so last time we defined a CSS rule as basically a combination of a CSS selector and an open curly brace and one or more declarations, and then a closing curly brace. So a CSS rule always has a selector and one or more declarations. You can see in this is out of the book, by the way. Everything is in the brown box on this slide is a CSS rule. So this is out of page 239 of the book. And everything inside the brown is a CSS rule. We looked at that last time. You can see the H3 is the selector, and then it has two declarations, one declaration for font family, and then another for color. And you can see that each declaration has a separate line. You don't have to do that, but I always like doing that. And then for each declaration, there's a property and a value. So today we'll look at the different properties that exist in CSS, and the whole rule is always closed off by a curly brace at the end. And then also a semicolon is always at the end of the value. So there's a property followed by a colon, and then a value followed by a semicolon. So that's the syntax for CSS rules. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit last time.
I got suctioned onto. I need some.
We talked about a little bit last time, but in CSS, to truly understand layouts, for example, everything in CSS uses what's called boxes. And to truly understand layouts, especially, you need to understand the box model. The box model, we looked at that last time. It basically refers to the fact that in CSS, every element is treated like a box. So this means that every CSS style rule that's being used, it's being applied to a box. Every element basically is represented by a box. So when you're styling things, you're styling that box and not necessarily the element itself, as many people tend to think. So the best way to view the invisible box is to use the DevTools in your browser. And the best is Chrome's DevTools. Chrome has the best DevTools, I believe, or in my opinion. And then and the most complex like aspect of the box model is really the margin property, which we'll cover next when we look at layout properties. So you can always access the box model of anything. Let me just pull that up really quickly by using the DevTools in any browser. So for example, if I want to look at, if I want to just click on, again, I clicked on Control-Shift-I to access the DevTools, and I can just like look at this sign up button, for example. And if I want to look at the box model for that sign up button, I go all the way to the very bottom, and I can see the box model for that sign up button. So, yeah.
I've messed with those before, and it just crashed the website.
Yes, it's very cool. It tells you, it gives a good like understanding of how everything's built in CSS. But we'll talk about the box. You can notice that the innermost portion of the box model is always the padding, then the border, then the margin, and then like the position of the different things. So we'll talk first about layout, which is the padding and the margin, and then after that we'll talk about position. So you can see sort of how they
Wait,
relate.
so
Yeah.
so HTML is for like the actual like build of the thing,
Yes,
while the CSS is for the looks.
exactly.
Ah,
HTML is like for the content, like the actual like, for example, this has basically like iframes. So you code the iframes in HTML, then you make it look like, attractive using CSS, basically. So yeah. Okay, so now let's start by looking at layout properties. So for layout, there's the most common layout properties are width, height, padding, and then margin. So let's look closer at each of those. So layout properties basically let you control the size of an element on the page. And the most common of them is the width. So the width and the height are basically equally common. So the width property lets you set the width of the element, just like you would think. And it can be in pixels, it can be in percentages or other units. We'll cover units later on, but it's most commonly specified in pixels. Height is similar. Height lets you set the height of the element. And it uses the same units as the width property. You can also use auto. In this case, I'm using auto. Auto basically maxes out the remaining space. Anytime you use auto, it's just telling the web browser, max out the space that I can use for height. That's what that does. And in the in layout properties, you can use property names also, like Well, let's first look at padding. So the padding property sets basically the padding of the innermost portion of the box model. So the padding you saw in the previous slide is like the innermost portion. Let me just go to the previous slide really quickly. You saw the padding is like the innermost portion of the elements. There's elements and right above it is padding. Right now it has 6 pixels width all around. So that's what the padding lets you set, is that innermost sort of space right around the element itself. But in CSS, the padding, you can use like property names like padding left, padding right. The padding property lets you get very specified, like, or specific. So you can use property names like padding left, padding right, padding top, or you can use a shorthand property called just padding. And then when you use the shorthand, you can specify multiple values at once. And each of these values, the first one stands for the top value, the second one is for the right value, the third one is for the bottom value, and the last one is always the left value. And I always like to use the like acronym terrible, TRBL, to help me with this, because instead of just going, for me, the most intuitive way of doing it would just be to say top, bottom, left, right. Like everyone would remember just top, bottom, left, right. For some reason, they did this weird thing where they went like clockwise. So it's always top, then right, then bottom, then left. So whenever you're using shorthand in CSS, when you have multiple values like that, it's always top, right, bottom, left. Like it's going counter, like clockwise, not counterclockwise, but clockwise. So that's a shorthand. And then margin is also a little bit like padding. It lets you define the space around the element's content. So you can use it to add space between elements or margins from the surrounding container. So the margin property is probably the most confusing of all of the layout properties because it's not fixed. And it depends on the margin around the adjacent or the element that's touching it. So we'll quickly look at an example of that. If you have two margins next to each
Okay,
other, basically, what was that?
so if I was on a phone or some sort of different device, then the margins would change because the phone screen isn't the same as the computer screen.
A little bit. It really margins change based on the elements that it touches. So I'll demonstrate real quick. But basically, the margin property is just like the padding, but it basically like will take if you have two margins next to each other, the margin property will take the bigger value and it will ignore the smaller value. And I'll demonstrate that really quickly. It's a little bit weird, but you get used to it. Um, um, Otherwise, it's just like the padding property. You can specify individual like margins, like margin top, margin bottom, or you can use the shorthand name, just margin, and you can specify multiple values like top, bottom, left, right, in one line. So let me just quickly demonstrate. Okay, so in this code, let me make this big. In this code, you can code this up on your own. In fact, it's very
Ooh.
good if you did try to go ahead and code it up. So in
Alright.
this, you can see that I'm just making an H1. ID is equal. I'll just basically, maybe I should just write everything out real quick. No, that's fine. I think you can just, it's very simple, straightforward. So I'm making an H1. ID is equal to box one. And then I'm just like the text inside the H1 is I am heading in a box. That's the H1. Then I have another H1. The ID is box two. And then the text inside of that is I'm heading in another box. I'm another heading in a box. So I just have two H1s on top of each other. And then I'm styling those H1s. I'm going to style box one by selecting the ID, box one. And I'm going to give it a border of orange, a solid orange border. We'll talk about borders later on. Let me make that 10 pixels for now. And then let me just not even do margins at all for now. And then for the second box, I'll give it like a solid purple color. Again, I'll make it 10 pixels for now. And then let me just like not do any margin at all in the beginning. Okay, very good. Let me save this. Now let me run this. Let me run it on CodePen just to make it look a little bit, let me just go ahead and run it on CodePen. That's fine.
I'm running it on CodePen right now.
You're on CodePen? Okay, very good. Yeah, I think, why not explore CodePen real quick? To do CodePen, you just like click on the button that says start coding. It's very, very nice. So I'll click on the button that
Yeah.
says start coding, and right away it opens up pen. Let me close the DevTools. And now let me just
Wait a minute. Oh,
yeah,
I'm doing it in HTML, not CSS. Oof.
yeah. Let me close out the JavaScript because I'm not gonna be using that.
No. Is there an undo button?
In CodePen, I don't know.
No.
Let me make it big.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm doing an H1. I'm
Come
just gonna
on.
call this um
Times New Roman.
yeah, so I'm gonna give this ID.
No, it only recorded half of it.
ID equals box one. Oops, box one. H1. So now I'm going to create another H1. ID is equal to box two. And you can see it's already rendering the elements for me. And then I'm going to do
Squarespace advertisements.
I'm going to do the content of box two is going to be another heading box. Okay, very good. Heading. Oops. Heading in a box. Okay. So those are my two boxes. Now let me add some CSS. I don't like CodePen because it doesn't let you actually do the style attributes. Like I like the fact that when I do Notepad,
Oh, that's how
I
to
have to
do it.
actually type like style and then like close it off with style. But in CodePen, I could just like start writing CSS. So that's a little bit annoying, but that's fine. So let me grab the first ID, box one. Then let me start styling that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Uncle David, I'm quite confused. I just pasted HTML code in a CSX thing.
Yeah, the CSS box is only for CSS stuff. So, but you can actually put,
Okay.
what's nice about CodePen is actually you can put CSS in the bottom of the HTML like this. Can actually put CSS in the bottom of it.
Why?
I know, but I just want to show you that you can do it both ways. But most people always do it in CodePen the other way. So you can do this. Box one. And then let me just give it like border. And then I'm gonna do solid like 10 pixels, like I said before. And then I'm going to give it a color of orange. Very good. And then I'm going to give the other box two.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Solid.
Can I see box one again? I think I made a mistake because it's not orange. I I don't need the style attribute. It's fine. The border. Solid. 10 pixels. It's
Orange.
I want it purple.
You can do purple. I'll make the second one purple.
It
Solid 10 pixels.
works. It's
Purple.
wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is
So
cheese. I'm gonna have it yellow.
yeah. So okay, so now I have two
There
boxes.
you
One of them is orange, the other one is purple. They're on top of each other. In CodePen, I can always just put the style all by itself. It's usually recommended to put the style in an external like sheet. So I'll go ahead and do that instead.
go.
So let me do that instead really quickly. This is supposed to be the proper way. You put it in the CSS box.
I don't like these brackets.
And now it
Border.
applies the CSS. Okay, so now,
Solid.
yeah. So now, let me go ahead and show you what happens if I apply margin. So for example, if I put a margin on the top box, like if I say margin, let's just do margin top of like 50 pixels, you'll see what happens. Notice how
Hey.
it moved the top box down 50 pixels. Let me do margin bottom of 50. Okay, so you see what I did? It like added a gap of 50 pixels between the bottom.
Oh.
Let me show what happens if I do margin
Uncle
bottom
David,
0 pixels.
they're just gonna be stuck together.
And let me now
They're
show you what
not.
happens if I do a margin top of this one of 0 pixels. So now notice they're like basically right on top of each other. They're like touching. So you can see now that the box model is very good at describing how everything works because if I like do control shift I and I look at the dev tools and I just focus on this and I go all the way to the bottom, I can see now that like my padding is basically nothing. I just have a border and the margin, which is exactly what I specify. And the margin is the padding is 0. And the same if I click on the other one. I have a bottom margin, but I have no top margin at all, and just like a border and no padding at all. So anyway, that's how you
I
basically
forgot the
can,
semicolon.
can verify everything. So now, oops, I clicked on that ad.
Uncle David, look what I managed to do.
What did you do? Anyway,
Wait, I want to show you. It's beautiful.
let me show you something now really quickly about the margin property. So before, like I
All
said,
right.
margin will always take the maximum value anytime you're touching something else. Oh, let me show, Moeen, let me send you the notes. Um,
Oh, someone else is here. Hello.
let me send you the notes. Okay. So now I said before, margin is a little bit strange because it always just takes the maximum value when you're like touching another, when two elements are touching and you apply a margin on one of them, it's going to take the maximum value of those two margins. So for example, if I do a margin bottom of like 20 pixels, it's going to give me 20 pixels like space between the top box and the bottom box. But now let's see what happens if I do a margin top of 20 pixels. Notice like nothing happened. Nothing happened. That's always confusing for a lot of people because it's like, well, wait a minute. I did a margin top of 20 on the bottom box and then a margin bottom of 20 on the top box. So I should have 40, I should have a total of 40 pixels in between them. But no, margin doesn't do that. It just takes the maximum of the two. So for example, if the maximum of the two is like let me show you what happens if I do this one as 0. If I do the margin bottom to be 0, notice still nothing happens because 20 is bigger than 0 and it just makes the whole margin 20. It's so strange. If I make the top one 50, it's going to make the whole thing 50 and it's going to completely ignore the 20. It's just going to take the top value of the margin of the other one, which is 50. So margin is a little bit confusing because it always takes the maximum margin and ignores the other margin whenever two elements are touching each other. So it does not add the margins of them together. It does not like subtract the margins. It just takes the maximum value of them together. So margins are always a little bit tricky. So
Oh, that's why mine didn't work.
yeah, it always just takes the
I'm gonna
maximum
go
value.
change that.
Yeah. So the only way you can make them touch again is if you did margin 0 on both of them. So okay,
There we go.
yeah. So that's how margin works. Now let's look at and let me quickly show you the shorthand for margin. So for margin, you can do like a shorthand where you can just specify multiple. You can just do margin.
Hello.
Top is going to be 0. And then again, it's going like it's terrible. I like the terrible as the acronym. the right is going to be next. So I'll do right like 5 pixels. And then bottom is going to be like 5 pixels. And then like left is going to be 0 pixels. So that's how you do margin. Let me make it a little bit more pronounced. Let me do 50 for the left, and then let me do bottom. Let me do 50 for the right also. Wait, TRBL, terrible. So right is 50. Let me do a left of 50, so which is going to be here. Yeah. So and then the bottom, let me just leave the bottom alone because that's the bottom box anyway. So you can see how you can use shorthand CSS by using these like multiple values in a single line. Okay, very good. And then it's always TRBL or terrible is what I like to use. Okay, very good. Now let me go back to slides. So those are layout properties. Again, you can get very deep. There's a lot more layout properties. I'm just focusing on a few of them. So now we'll look at position properties. So position lets you control basically the location of the element on the page. So it's similar to layout, but position properties move everything at once. Like the entire element is being moved at once, including the padding, including the margins. The whole element is getting moved. So for position properties, the most common ones are top, bottom, left, right, z-index in position itself. So the top, right, bottom, and left properties are basically letting you set the location of the element, and they're fairly self-explanatory. Top lets you control how, where it is from the top of the page. Right is how far it is from the right of the page. Bottom is how far it is from the bottom of the page, and left is how far it is from the left of the page. You can use pixels or percentages. For now, we'll just use pixels, and then you can use other special elements that we'll cover later on. Z-index is very cool because Z-index basically lets you set the 3D height. So that is the height coming out of the page. So it's like the three-dimensional height of the elements coming out of the page. So it can have negative value, so you can put elements underneath other elements. And then lastly, the position element basically lets you control the basis of the location. So relative means you're using a relative basis. So the position will be relative to the location of other elements. And then absolute is also a position value. Absolute means the basis will be absolute. It will not be relative to any other elements. It will be independent of other elements. And then sticky is another one you could use. Sticky basically means the location of the element will not scroll out of the view of the page. So when you scroll, instead of it scrolling out of view, it's just going to stick to the top of the page. So that's what sticky does. So let's just quickly play around with some position elements. Let me go back to CodePen. So let's play around with some positions. Let's put a position on the border on the second box. Let's do the first thing you want to do is set whether or not you want the position to be absolute or relative. So here I'm going to say position relative. Relative. By default, it's always relative. And then I'll say top. But if you don't set it to be relative, you won't be able to use top, bottom, or left. So I'll say top like 10 pixels. And notice it added 10 pixels to the top. Notice they're no longer touching. So it's a lot more straightforward when you use position because they just add. If I put bottom on this one, let me put bottom here. First of all, I have to give the first box a position type. It's going to be relative. And then if I say bottom, I do 10 pixels, it's just going to add. So let me make it more pronounced by doing bottom of 20 pixels. Oh, so I'm sorry. Bottom is basically controlling the location of the first box from the bottom of the page. So let me do this because they're not inside of each other. So relative is not going to do anything because the boxes are not inside of each other. So box one, notice in the HTML, is completely separate from box two. So it's basically like they're absolute positioned anyway, because they're not like inside of each other. Let me put an H1. Let me put like everything inside of a container. Let me do this. Let me do like I think we talked about divs before. So I'll put everything inside of a div. And a div is basically like a box, like a giant. I'm just putting a giant box. That's the easiest way to understand what div does. I'm putting everything inside of a box, and now I'll call this. I'll give it an ID of um, box three. So box three is like the outer box. So if I do like box three, if I isolate box three with my CSS, and I say give box three, um, um, I don't know, like how do I show this? Let me give it a border first. Let me do like yeah, I'll just give it a solid border for now. Let's do just solid border. So you can see that the outer box is containing the two smaller boxes, the two H1s. Now, if I do, let's say bottom, or let me do position relative. I don't actually need to do, but just in case, I'll do that. Position relative. I'll do a position relative on the outermost box. Now, if I do a bottom, if I do for box one, let's do top equals top 20 pixels. It's going to go 20 pixels from the top of just that outer box. So if I want to do for the second box, let's say so anytime I specify a position for the top box, it's going to be relative to the box it's inside of. So let me see, let me do bottom. Let me do for the top box. Let me do bottom. Make sure I'm on the top box. Yeah. Let me do bottom of like 40 pixels. If I do bottom of 40 pixels, it's not, let me do 80 pixels, so it's more pronounced. Interesting. So what it should be doing is it should be adding 80 pixels from the bottom. Let's see. And then the top box is also relative. Let me see. Why isn't it giving me more space? Hmm. I wonder if because I already have, let me take away relative on the top. Let's see this. Let me take away that relative position. No, I want that to be relative. I wonder if because that's relative, I have to make these absolute. Let me just test something. No, it's still not giving me 80 pixels from the bottom. Let me think. Even if I do 180, it doesn't really do anything. It should be pushing this top box like really, really high up. Um, because it's using the bottom. It should be using the bottom as a reference, the bottom of the container as a reference. Um, let me see. Anyway, I don't want to waste too much time on it. CSS can be very, very confusing. The best way to learn CSS is, I think, to use CSS tricks and just to basically like read up on everything that they explain. So I can, quickly check. In fact, let me check real quick. The top position properties. Let me just search. Position. Okay, position relative. Okay, relative to its original position. The element is now nudged from. Okay. Original position. Is it the original position or the position relative to other values? Okay, relative in elements, original position remains in the flow of the document, just like the static value. The positional properties nudge the element from the original position in that direction. Anyway, I don't want to waste too much time on position, but basically that's what top, bottom, and then relative or absolute lets you do. So top, bottom will add, but I'm just not able to illustrate how it adds right now. But margins do not add. But top, bottom, and left, right, they do add. So anyway, let me move on. So apart from that, let me do z-index really quickly. Let me show you what z-index looks like. So right now, you can see how this bottom box is overlapping with the outermost box. You can see how that black line is beneath this purple line. So what I can do is, on the box that's purple, box number 2, I can set the z-index to be like -1. And then if I set it to be -1, notice how now the black line is above it. It like goes underneath the black line. I can make it more pronounced by, now that it's -1, I can actually move it up a little bit. Let me do top of the bottom box, like -10 pixels real quick. Yeah, now you see it's underneath that orange box. If I do a z-index of 1, it's going to be above it. And if I do -1, it's going to be below. So that's what z-index does. And it controls basically the height coming out of the page of the element. So that's what z-index lets you do. It's very cool. Okay, very good. Now let's move on to, so those are the position elements or the position properties. Now we'll look at, I believe we'll look at background properties.
Just a
No,
question.
yeah, go ahead.
Kind of random, but since we now have a z-index, a y-index, and an x-index, we can create 3D objects.
There is no X or Y index. X or Y index is basically top and right. So, or right and left.
Oh.
So X index would be right. Y index would be top and bottom. And that's basically, yeah, there's only Z index for coming out of the page or into the page.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
So
the z-index will affect like the order of the elements.
the 3-dimensional order, yeah. So you can make 3D looking objects with the Z index. It's going to affect the 3-dimensional order of the objects. Yeah. Okay, very good. So now let's look at font properties. Font properties are very easy because we've all used font properties before. In HTML, they work a lot like they use in Microsoft Word. The most commonly used font property is font family. So you can use a font family of like Arial or Times New Roman or Open Sans or Tahoma or Courier. Those are, you can use basically any font that exists as a font family. And then Google Fonts is like the best resource probably for fonts. Let me just quickly show you. Google Fonts has like a lot of fonts. So if you just go to Google, they have like all these free fonts you can choose from. And you can use all of these fonts on the web instantly. Because if you want to use a property on the web with Google Fonts, all you have to do is like click on the plus. Yeah, so you click on the font and then you click on get font. And then it's going to give you the code to embed it into HTML. You'll see, you know that it's code because it has the HTML brackets right next to it. And it's going to say get embed code. And then it shows you the HTML to use to basically get that font. So you can use Google Fonts to basically get almost any font you could possibly think of. They have a lot of fonts available. Okay. All right, so apart from font family, we also have font size. Font size is pretty self-explanatory. You can set a size of 12 pixels, which will make all the characters 12 pixels tall. We've all played with font size before in Microsoft Word or with our email. So font size works the same way in HTML as it does in like Microsoft Word. And then I believe the max font size is like 500 pixels. And then the minimum font size is, I believe, like 0 pixels or 1 pixel. So another font property you might use is the color. Notice it's not font color, it's just color. For some reason, HTML, there's no property called font color. It's always just color. Color automatically sends the font color for you. So you don't need to put like font in front of it. Just the word color is always just affecting the font. So when I put color red, often people will think, oh, I'm making the element red. No, it's just always making the font red. And then for color, you can use either names like red, blue, green. You can also use RGB codes. You can also use hex codes. You can also use HSL or um, or different types of like format. I believe HSL is one of them. I think CMYK is another one you could use. So and then the font weight property is the last one we'll look at. Font weight is um, lets you control basically the thickness of the letters. You can use values of either 400, 500, 600, or 700, or you can use names like normal, medium, semi-bold, or bold. Let's just quickly play around with some font names or font properties. Let's go back to our pen. Let me just do for box 2 or box number 1. Let me just set some font properties. Let me do font family. Oops, I want to be for box 1. Font family. Let me do Arial, or let me do Courier. Something weird. There you go. So now it's in Courier font, which is like the typewriter font. Um, a lot of people call it typewriter font. And then I'll do font size. We do like 14 pixels. And now let me do font width. Let me font weight. Let me give it bold, or let me just give it 700 instead of bold. So 700 is basically bold, or let me do 800. Yeah, it's always a little bit tricky to use the numbers. It's easier to just do bold. Oops. Bold. Still didn't. Okay, I guess it's already bolded. So yeah, um, yeah. So that's fine. And then that's all we'll look at. So there's a lot of different font properties. You can just look at CSS tricks for all the different font properties. We'll just focus on those ones for now, but you can go to CSS tricks and then click on font, go to font, and then there's a lot of font properties. There's just like a lot of font properties. And then you can use the shorthand of just font where you can specify multiple properties in one. But there's so many font properties, there's no way we can cover all of them. Line height. So yeah, let me just show you what the shorthand looks like. So if I use the shorthand, I can just do font, and then shorthand would be like Courier, 14 pixels. And then with the space, I'll do bold. And then that's it. So now I can get rid of everything else, and it's gonna still do the same thing. Oh, didn't. Oh, I think first when you do the shorthand, the first thing you have to do is the font size, and then the font family, Courier, I believe. I think 14 pixels bold, Courier. Oh, when you do the shorthand, the font family has to be in quotes, I believe. No. How do you do the shorthand? Let me see. Yeah, it's just the very end. Okay, I guess it's the very end of it. So let me see. So it should be working. Yeah. Anyway, I think you have to do like the pixels. You have to do bold first. Okay, there it goes. So my mistake. So you have to do the font weight. It has to go in order. You do the weight first, then the size, then the font family. So whenever you use the shorthand, it has to be in
Uh,
that order. So it's always, for me, I think it makes sense to just literally give them, specify them in one line at a time instead of using the shorthand. But the shorthand is convenient anyway. Okay, so that's
okay,
fonts.
but when
What's
I
that?
typed it with the weight first, when I typed it with the weight first, the weight doesn't do anything,
Are you sure
and
you
it
used,
remains white.
are you sure you used like the weights and then the right name, bold? Let me show you also
Uh,
what it would look like if we want to do color. So for font color, we would always just put like color. We won't actually write font color. We just write color. And let me make it, for example, red. So now it makes the font red. When I'm using the shorthand, I believe color has to be um, like the first one. Let's see. No, I think it's weight and then the size
wait,
and then the color. No, I think it's going to be
for
weight
some
and then
reason, if you put anything in front of the thing, then it starts working.
what
Like
do you
if you
mean?
just put a random L or something in front of bold with a space. No, like no in front of bold and then with a space. I don't know if there's something I'm doing wrong,
Anyway,
but it
the
doesn't
shorthand is always
allow.
confusing. That's why I don't like to use the shorthand anyway. So you can just use color for fonts, color, and then red. That's a guarantee way of always getting controlling the font color. Okay, very good. So that's how you do font. Now let's move on to the next property we'll look at, which is going to be background. So for background properties, they're used to basically create a canvas or a foundation for the style of the page. So background, some of the common ones is background color, background image, background size, background repeat, and then background just by itself is a shorthand. So background color will change the color of the background. Background image will let you add an image. Background size will let you control the width and height of the background. Background attachment is another one that's not listed here. Background attachment lets you control how the image, if it's an image background, how the image is shown. Background repeat lets you control how images are repeated. Um, you'll see what I mean when we demonstrate real quickly. And then background all by itself, again, is the shorthand. So let's go ahead and quickly look at background. So here in CSS and CodePen, I'm just going to do like for box one, let me do it on box two. Let me do it on box two. For box two, I'm going to give it a background, or let me do it actually on the box three. Yeah, let me do it on box three. That's going to be better. So box three, the outer box, let me give it a background. Background color. Let me do like green. Well, let me do light green. So it makes everything light green. Notice that the second box automatically disappeared because the z index is -1. So let me make the z index on that one actually 1. So it comes back. Let me make the z index on the first orange box 2, so that that one is still on top. I want it to still be on top. So let's see, I wonder why it's not putting it on top. Um, Let me set Z index is a little bit tricky sometimes. Let me see. So this one is Z index 2. It should be above this one. I wonder if it's because the Z index of the outer box is not set. So let me see. This one is the index two. Position is relative, right? And the world is not absolute. That is so strange. Let me change the position of the outer box to absolute. That relative. For some reason, the Z index. Interesting. Uh, I wonder if it's not. I wonder if that's because the top is negative here. No, that shouldn't be affected at all. Should be above. Let me just make the Z index this 20 real quickly. Wow, very strange. Anyway, so let me make the Z index of this one 0 in that case. Let me make it 0. Wow, so strange. Anyway, I'll figure out what's going on with that, why I can't change the Z index of the orange one to be on top anymore. Um, but let me give the let me play around with background. So background, let me do a background image, and I'll grab an image from our website. And I'll just copy this URL from our website. I'll put it in the chat so you guys can play around with the image also. You can grab any image from the internet, but for now, we're just going to use this image. Where'd it go? Or is it in the slides? I think I put it in the slides. Oh, yeah, it's in the slides. Okay. We're going to use this image. I'll put it in the chat. You guys can play with it also. So I'll put this image inside of for my background image. For the background, anytime you want to use a URL or a link, you have to put URL and then open bracket, close parentheses, and then you have to put the URL, actually the web address, in single quotes. So now I'll paste the URL, and notice how it grabbed it from the internet, and now it puts it there. So let me change the attachment of the URL. I'll do background, because I want it to be actually visible, background attachment. Attachment is also used a lot. Basically, it's going to control sort of how the image is scaled. So I'll do contain to make sure that it's always like scaled so everything is visible. And it's not doing anything. Let me do cover. Anyway, all right, whatever. I don't want to waste too much time on this. CSS is like, honestly, CSS is deep. You can spend a lot of time fidgeting around with CSS. Background attachment should give me what I want. Let me try background size. And I'll do 100%. Okay, there we go. So if I do 100% for background size, it lets me control it better. If I do 10%, yeah, it lets me control it. So let me do 50%. Very good. So you can sort of see. And then if I don't want the image to repeat, this is where I would set my background repeat. By default, it always repeats. I'll do background repeat, and I'll say no repeat. Oh, I forgot to spell repeat correctly. Repeat. There it is. And now it stops repeating the background. So that's how you use the background property. Let's go ahead and move on. And again, you can use the shorthand where you just use background, and you can do multiple properties in one line. Good. So now let's look at border. Border is very, very deep. Once again, today is a long day. Border has a lot of different properties. So border is a little bit like background. You can use border to create an outline around any element for whatever style reason you have. Border color will change the color of the border. Border style will let you change the type of border that's being used. There's a lot of different border styles. We'll just quickly play around with that. CSS Tricks has a good list of possible types. Border width lets you control the width of the border or the thickness of the border. Border radius lets you control how rounded the corners of the border are. And then border is the name of the shorthand. And then for border, unlike other properties, you can use like fine control properties like border top, border left. And these fine control properties basically let you control like a single segment of a border. Border top, for example, will isolate only the top segment of the border. So border radius also has fine control properties like border top left radius, which lets you control the top left segment radius. So let's go ahead and play around with that a little bit. Okay, here's our CSS tricks or CodePen. Now let's do a border. We already did a border of solid. Now let's actually use everything correctly. Let's do a border width. The top one of 10 pixels. Now that we know how to use border, we can use the properties correctly. Let's do a border style of solid. And let's do border color of orange. Notice how it turned the border color to red. That's very interesting because we just did color red, and color red applied to the border also. So that's something you might want to pay attention to. So, now let's play around really quickly with the border style. You can do a dashed style, and it's going to make the border a dashed border. You can do a ridge, and it's going to make the border like a ridged type of border. So there's a lot of different styles you can play around with border style. So we'll move on from border. There's a deep, let's do border radius really quickly. Let's do a border radius of like 10 pixels. Radius, 10 pixels. So you can see when we do a border radius of 10 pixels, it rounds off all the corners of the border, of the orange border, of the box one, that is. So let's go ahead and do a border ridge of the second one also, border style of ridge for the second box. Because I like the look of that. So let's just redo that. Border style ridge for the second box. So now you can see that it adds a ridge style for the second box. Okay, very good. So that's what border does. And last one is that we'll look at tonight is text. So text properties, it's very easy to confuse the text properties with font properties, but text properties are not the same as font properties. They are for controlling blocks of text, not individual characters. So text align the common ones are text align, text decoration, text transform, text shadow, overflow, white space. These all contain how blocks of text look. Text align is for aligning the inner content of the text in a block or an element. Text decoration lets you add an underline, overline, line through, or a combination of them to select the text. Text transform lets you control the text case, like capitalization of the text. And then text shadow lets you give the text a shadow. The first two values of the shadow specify the length of the shadow and the offset of the shadow. Then the final value specifies the horizontal distance. And the second specifies the vertical distance of the shadow. So text shadow is a little bit complicated. Basically, like value 1 is X coordinates, value 2 is Y coordinates, value 3 is the blur, and then value 4 is the color of the shadow. Let me just quickly demonstrate text. So let's do a text shadow on the second box. Let's do for the second box. First of all, let's make the text, let's do text alignment. First, let's play with text alignment. Let me move this down. Let me see. Yeah, let's do text alignment center. So we'll do for box number 2, we'll do right below the position. I always like to have position as the first one. We'll do text align. We'll do center. Notice how I moved the text to the center of the box. Now we'll do a text shadow. And then for the shadow, again, remember the first values for the X coordinate, we'll do like 2 pixels for the X coordinate, 2 pixels for the Y coordinate. And then the blur, we'll do a blur of 4 pixels. And then the actual, the blur radius, sorry, is that third value. Then the last value is the color. So let's do a color of white. Or let's do a color of green. So that's going to give us a text shadow. Now you can see how that shadow looks like. At 2 pixels offset from the X coordinate, 2 pixels offset from the Y coordinate, 4 pixels, that's the blur. And then the color is the last one, which is green. That's how you do a text shadow. Okay, very good. We're way over time. So you can get very deep. We didn't have time to cover overflow. Overflow is what happens when the text like flows over what you want to happen when the text overflows the element. Let me just quickly demonstrate. So let me just type random text in here. And then you're going to see that right now, yeah, notice the text is like overflowing the element. So what overflow lets you do, overflow lets you basically specify what happens when the text overflows the element. So if I don't want this to happen, I can set my overflow to hidden. So I can do overflow. And then I can do hidden. And it's going to not allow any text to overflow the element. It's going to block it from overflowing. That's what overflow does. And then white space. White space is basically like letting you control whether or what you want the text to do when it like spills over one line. So white space is like how you want the text to be handled if it's on more than one line. Let me just show you. Right now you can see the text is going on 2 lines. So if I do white space, no wrap, I think it's white hyphen space. White hyphen space. If I do no wrap, I'll tell it that I don't want the text to ever wrap. Notice now it's always going to be on one line. Even if the text is on multiple lines, it will never be on more than one line in the actual page. So that's what like white space does for text. Okay, very good. So that's all the properties we're going to look at today. Again, very long day. CSS properties are like, there's a lot of them. So we only scratched the surface. Let's just review all the properties we looked at tonight. We looked at layout properties, position properties, font, background, border. I'm hiding the slides, border, and then text properties. So there's a lot more properties. I encourage you to go to csstricks.com and then play around with these. CSS Tricks like has a lot of again, the best resource is Mozilla, but the most readable is CSS Tricks. They have the most readable information. You just click on Almanac, and then you'll be able to select properties, and then you'll be able to basically explore all the different properties that exist in CSS. There's a lot of them. Okay, very good. That's it for tonight. Hopefully you guys are submitted your project. I'll start looking at the projects. I think so far we only had like 3 submissions so far. So you guys can still submit the project. I know you probably haven't had time because of school, but that project is very important. The next project is going to build heavily on it. So next time we'll start using these CSS properties. All right, watch the video, and I'll see you next week.
Bye.